Cannonball Run, we're coming for that record. What is up, Rad Potential YouTube? I'm Mr. Rad, and in this series, I'm going to be taking the best rotary engine that Mazda has ever produced from this FD RX7 and shove it into the best chassis that Mazda has ever produced, the Mazda RX8. So let's get started. There are tons of videos out there going over just how legendary the FD RX7 is, and I agree. It is timeless, it's beautiful, they make great power. However, the short version of why I'm taking the engine from one of these cars and putting it into a more superior RX8 chassis is simply this. I'm 6'4". I don't fit in an FD RX7. The FD RX7 interior literally falls apart when you breathe on it. They're 30 years old, it's plastic. Also, you're gonna pay about $7 grand to get a mint condition FD interior. The dashes are like $1,000, the door panels are like $500 a piece, and if your girlfriend gets in there and closes the door wrong, it literally falls apart. So in my opinion, the FD RX7 is not really a sustainable street car for somebody like me who really likes to drive their cars, considering I put thousands of miles a year on my project cars. I need my car not to fall apart, which is why the RX8 chassis just kind of levels up the FD. It's like the car, I mean, it is literally the next car. It is the successor from the FD. It's better in almost every way, aside from just a little bit less sex appeal. And you could literally buy probably 10 of these for the price of a barely running one of these. So looking close at how the FD engine fits into the RX8, let's just say it's super tight. So we had built an engine mount in the previous video. I've got, since that video, an excessive lower intake manifold with 4 injectors. So these are more of a symmetrical intake manifold. It's very simple. If you just look at this FD, which also has that intake manifold, the amount of space between the firewall and the intake is huge versus a completely stock one, which I don't have here to show you. But I also, on my car, cut off this right here and cut that off. So y'all see that coming up as we get to work on this, but effectively it fits. The short version of all the accessories that I want to run are as follows. So this is a factory water pump housing. I like mechanical water pumps. We're going to try to utilize that. AC and power steering. I won't have a power steering pump, but I am going to run an AC bracket to run an RX8 AC compressor on the FD RX7 engine. So that's a common upgrade for these cars, is to put the AC compressor from this on it. So we'll have that factory AC RX8 compressor. It literally is an RX8. The lines will just go right on. Huge win for the complexity of this builder, I guess, the uncomplexity of the AC system. So that's a, solution check. Over here, it gets a little more complicated. I'm not gonna have the giant, ugly water neck thing, okay? The thermostat cover. It's huge, it's ugly, we just don't want that. So in place of the ugly water neck, Bonsai Racing makes this really trick laser cut piece here that bolts on to hold the thermostat in, and then you can use any sort of aluminum tubing to make your own upper radiator hose / you're gonna need a cap to be able to fill this, or use a radiator that has that cap on it, right? So we've got this, we have to sort out all of that. The next water issue is that with the sway bar in this location and the steering rack here, the lower radiator hose off of an REW will not work. The outlet of it basically comes like straight forward like this, and you can't get a hose on it because of this proximity. So I chopped that off. That's actually what this piece is for. I'm going to weld this onto here. I guess my fabricator, TIG welder, is going to weld this onto here. And then now I will almost be able to simply take the OEM RX8 lower radiator hose, which is this, cut it a little shorter, and it should go right on, which will be huge for the success of this deal. So clearing the oil metering pump's a little tricky, and yes, I am going to keep an oil metering pump. So this is a Mr. Rad tech tip, oil metering pumps and premix. I'm not gonna take a ton of your time because the kickoff video for this is probably gonna be long and disorganized, and I'll quit talking about that. But oil metering pump tech tip. If your car is a street car, okay, you're gonna drive this thing to work. Let's say you're putting 10 to 15,000 miles on your car a year. Buying premix to drive 10 to 15,000 miles is expensive. And I personally don't want to spend that kind of money on premix just to burn it. An RX-7's already a money pit, but I don't want the money flying out the exhaust too. So when it comes to my philosophies on the oil metering pump and premix, pay attention closely. And comment below if you disagree or if you agree, okay? My RX7 track car, my red car out here, does not have an oil metering pump. It's a turbo 2-block fuel tech. There's really no good way for me to run an oil metering pump on it, so we don't run one. You premix only. That car sees 5,000 miles a year. It's kind of annoying to have to premix, but honestly, not that bad. It's on E85 too, occasionally flex fuel. So like that's a good car to have as a premix car, right? The weekend ripper, but you're ripping it all the time. There's no cruising, right? The RX8s, most FDs, I would say 80% of people that own rotary cars, y'all just drive your cars around town. You're not full track guy. It's a weekend warrior. You might put 5,000 miles on it a year, but you're just cruising, and it's a mostly stock car. If it's a mostly stock car, keeping the oil metering pump is great, and a little bit of premix in addition to that is also great. Ease of peace of mind. Premix also adds some stabilizer to your fuel, especially if the car sits. Okay, now, here's the other side of it. If you basically daily drive your RX8 or your FD, and you're gonna put a lot of miles on this thing, the oil metering pump is the best. Okay, it uses crankcase oil, not a lot of it, lubricates right into the engine. It works whether the engine's hot, cold, whatever, you get a good clean burn. The oil metering pump is like staged, so it's like a fuel injector. It puts less oil in it, less load, and more oil in it, high load. It's just, Mazda designed it. Millions of dollars of engineering R&D went into that versus what me, being some dude in his garage, plays with rotary cars. Like, I'm not the expert. They obviously are the experts on rotary engines. They made these and we just play with them. So I'm going to trust their advice. So yes, on my street car RX8, that's going to do another cannonball run, that's going to drive 6,000 miles in probably 5 days. Like, that is literally the best lubrication for that engine. That's my tech tip on that. I got other videos talking about premix. Y'all have your own opinions on what brands are better than others. Let's get back to this. The oil metering pump will kind of be in the way of building a turbo manifold, but we can work around that, as a lot of people, different cars, stock FDs have done that. So we'll make our own turbo manifold to the turbo up here, which you will see in just a second. Now, coming off the compressor side of the turbo, where is the intercooler gonna go? I'm gonna do a front mount intercooler, which you'll see in the future. All that get built, all the tubes connecting it. And off of that, it'll come back up here and go into a continuation of my earlier discussion on the intake, a drive-by-wire throttle body. So we modified this intake for some clearance, as you saw. Also took the FD cable throttle off, full function engineering bracket, GM, Gen 4, LS, drive-by-wire throttle body. So I could probably flip this over and run it on the back, but there's not enough room for this plug, and this is generally the orientation we want. So from here, I believe this is like close to 3.5 inches, comes around, over, down, through this hole, etc. Lots of fabrication to happen. I've also got to build some sort of an oil filler neck, and then also find a place to put the ignition coils. So, needless to say, we have a ton of work that needs to be done on this. Basically, the whole entire car needs to be built very quickly, which these videos are going to just like rapid fire, bam, 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 bam. Finally was able to stack up all the parts to get this thing done. So, finish this, then we go back to working on the FD, okay? Science. So, with all of that being said, is there anything else, Mr. Rad, that I missed that I want to talk about? Specifically at this point, outlining my constraints for the build. I don't really think so. The basics of it are, I want to make 600 horsepower on an REW, and the turbo I've got is going to let us do that. The engine's going to need some freshening up, studs, stuff like that in the future. This engine bay also needs painted. The whole car obviously needs painted at some point. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us on this project, but getting the mechanicals dialed should be relatively quick. So let's grab the turbo, set that in here, and see what other stuff we're going to run into. Then ideally not melt. Need my turbo box here, and then we can add this way. There we go. Nice. Nice. Okay. Hammer. Whoopah. All right. Y'all might recognize this turbo because I took it off my FD. The reason I was using it on the FD is because I like my stuff to share the same parts. So this is the cheap version of the turbo I want to run on here, but this effectively is a VS Racing Borg Warner S369. So it's not an actual Borg Warner, it's a VS Racing, but the blueprint of it is effectively the S369. Pretty big turbo, should easily make that 600 horsepower. I'm just knocked over a Greddy T78. This should easily make the power goals I want, which is 600 horsepower on E85. So I stole this turbo location and the sex appeal of an engine bay from Eccentric Motorsports. This is not my original creation. However, not uncommon to put the turbos up front like this to look all sexy. So Eccentric Motorsports, Zach and Clint, thank you so much. Y'all are so inspiring and do crazy builds. I love it. But this right here is where I want this to go. I'm probably going to clock it a little bit more like this so that the T4 flange is more on an angle versus just being straight up. So then I can kind of hide the T4 flange under the exhaust side, give me more room to clear the frame. But effectively, this location right here. So let's look at what this complicates before we go build a jig for the turbo. My box is kind of falling apart. I mean, how many people can say they've knocked over a Greddy T78 in their garage? Not very many, probably. Stay. I really want that to be like kicked up just a little bit more. Can I get that to stay kicked up? Okay. Nah, it's still falling. I've compressed my cardboard box too much. Stay. Right there. Oh yeah, that's close enough. So with the turbo kind of located, I can now decide how I'm gonna mount the turbo so I can build the turbo kit, and really just getting the turbo in its location. I think I'm gonna kick it up just a smidge is the most important part at this point, because I need to sort out everything else that goes around it and then decide if I need to move the turbo at all. So plenty of room for 3.5 inch downpipe through here. Obviously things are gonna get hot. That'll be cocked so the T4 flange won't be sitting under the frame rail. It'll be over here a little bit. Plenty of room. The turbo drain clears this brace, so that should be able to go down and out to under the oil metering pump up there. The cold side is going to go this way, front mount setup back out this way, kind of like an old school Greddy front mount. Air filter, honestly, is just going to have to be an air filter on the turbo. There's really no good way for me to run a tube somewhere else. Power steering and wiring, I'll cover what we're going to be doing in this video. Huge shout out, Tuned by Sean. Go check out his website, Mr. Rad 5 discount, 5% off. But we'll sort that out in the future as well. But I think that's where that needs to go. So let's build a bracket to hold this, probably off the oil drain, and mount it somewhere over here on the frame rail and get that positioned where I want it. Alright, so we're going to jump back, and I want to show you fitting this intake manifold. I didn't really have to hammer the firewall that much. I trimmed up the excessive manifold, hammered this back about 1/4 to 3/16 of an inch, maybe 3/8 of an inch. The lower intake fits, plenty of room now. I clearanced the upper intake manifold by just cutting these brackets off, slimming it up, cleaning up the casting basically, and it fits nicely. The next step is to consider your oil filter. I'm going to use the RX8 location. You could do a remote mount, and then ultimately your throttle body. The cheapest way to do this swap would be to use the RX8's drive-by-wire. The GM one's a little bit bigger. I like the way it looks, so I ran that. But the turbo location, perfect. All right, so I've got the turbo like jigged in place, which really not going to move or anything, and I'm happy with this location. The one thing that does suck about this location is that the OEM ECU box is no longer going to fit. So I was intending to try to like leave room there such that when I jig this out, if you would want this turbo manifold, you could set it up as an REW swap on like an Adaptronic plug and play, which does work. But I think that in essence of I want mine to look really nice, and I'm not really willing to cut corners and make this like a cheap swap. I think the whole factory ECU box is going to have to, you're just not going to be able to use that. So I'm not using it. You know, I've got a Haltech S3 that's going to go under the dash. Go check out Tuned by Sean if you need Haltech stuff. Mr. Rad 5 gets your discount on Tuned by Sean's website. Go check that out. But that's literally the perfect segue into the next bit, which is the engine management side of things as well. So I'm gonna run mine under the dash, right? Which means I have to get all the wiring for the chassis side of the RX8 to under the dash, but also we have to integrate the chassis side into the car. So this is probably the coolest thing. There's gonna be a definitely more in-depth video specifically on this, but we'll just kind of overview it right now. Looking at all this wiring, all of this was on the passenger side fender apron, right? So don't get too intimidated by this. This is very easy, guys, okay? So Tuned by Sean sells this patch harness right here, which if I can get it unplugged in an efficient manner, I'll show you this thing. All right, what this does is this plugs in to the ECU plug. Okay, so your computer on your stock RX8 would have plugged into this. This would have talked to the body of the car, right? He's got, when you purchase this, all right, he will sit down with you on a like Zoom call. It's super rad. He'll sit down with you on a Zoom call and go through how to wire this up and set up your base map in your computer for you. Okay, so if you buy a Haltech, you're gonna put it on, you're gonna use this patch harness, he will help you with setting this up. Okay, so Tuned by Sean's website, go check this out. This piece plugs in right here. Now, what this does, and like I said, I'll go over this in super detail when I build the wiring harness for this car. In this harness, you have the clutch switch, cruise control, brake switch, let me think, what else? CAN bus to the RX8's body control module, which is rad because now all the ABS wheel speed sensors, the Haltech can read that CAN bus, right? So basically anything the chassis sees, the Haltech is going to see it, in addition to, okay, when your Haltech is reading coolant temperature, RPM, all that stuff, it's going to send that data back to the RX8 chassis and show up on your dash. All right, so I also have a Haltech IC7 for this car, but I'm not going to be putting it in place of the factory like cluster. It's just going to go over above the radio to like look all cool, you know, R34 GTR data screen thing. All of that data is transmitted through here. So obviously you could take this whole wiring harness and go through the pinout with Sean and then rewire it and move it somewhere else. In addition to just this patch harness, you have this big harness right here, which has like for the factory engine, you know, the coil power, injector power, a few other things on here. So, you know, Sean's taken the time to go through and do all the wiring, you know, look at all data, which is like if you work at an automotive shop, that's the place where they have every information for any car. So like if you crash your RX8 and this wiring gets torn up, they can fix it, right? The tech, you know, service, but you have to like have a subscription to that, I think. So he's gone through all that to figure all this out. But like this big plug right here, like I'm gonna cut that off. There's 6 wires or 5 wires that go into it. I think I do need all 5 of them. So I'll have like a DTM connector right here that just plugs in. And then all of this harness, which initially is why we're looking in this corner, because we need to figure out what to do with all this wiring, is going to go under the fender, okay, but above the wheel so we don't rub through it. And then that will all go back behind the wiper reservoir and then into the cabin to the ECU. In addition, this wiring harness right here, a couple things that are pretty neat is that there is like a giant, you know, the air pump feed here. So you could actually use the air pump wiring to run a fuel pump or something if you wanted to, intercooler, tank, pump or whatever, but this wiring on the factory chassis is already there. Big old wires for that. So, you know, you could use the air pump control from Sean's harness to turn this on if you wanted to. In my situation, I'm not gonna need it. So I believe this is just ambient barometric pressure sensor, a bunch of grounds, the fuel pump resistor, I think, which I sat back there. I don't know if I need that, but I'm gonna go ahead and keep it plugged in. And then also my wiper sprayer. So all the grounds are gonna get shortened. They'll get grounded just right up here, you know, behind the headlight. The fuel pump stuff, I'm gonna run all that through this fender. So let me just kind of show you that real quick. But effectively, all of this wiring here will be up in here. It's gonna be kind of hard for you to see, but right here where my fingers are going up over, there's a little pocket in here inside the frame. And then right there's a little hole. And then that little hole comes out here. So I'll be able to run all those wires up through here to like kind of shave this side of the engine bay, which would be rad. And then eventually, I think when I pull all this back apart to paint everything, I'm gonna move this giant wiring harness to the same spot. So that might be a little tricky. Maybe I have to extend some wires, depin some stuff. I really have no idea, but I value a clean engine bay and I really don't wanna have like this big old corrugated snake over here. And some of this stuff I can run down and clean it up. The fuse box has to stay. You know, I want to paint the top of this Nordic green. And then also over here, this is your power steering controller and the power steering relay. And then there's one other relay in here, which I think functions for this as well, because it's got big old giant wires. So this wire, so this relay, this and this, all of this is gonna stay here. I'm not gonna relocate any of that wiring. So I'm just gonna build a cover to go over that. I imagine a nice piece of aluminum that's kind of gonna follow the strut tower here and come forward, seal to the side of the frame, paint that Nordic green, and then also a cooling panel that's going across the top of this eventually as well. So lots of things to think about and plan for. At the beginning, you really want to have, I've had the last couple months to science this out, so I've got a pretty good plan for everything. But you really want to have a good plan when it comes to like going into a build that's this in depth or this crazy, like full on. It's not just the engine swap and let things ride. Like, I want this car to look really nice too. And we have to keep all that in mind as soon as you're going to start the project. Otherwise, you'll have, just like the FD, I've got a coolant line that's right next to my turbo, and it's not ideal. So without repeating, having coolant lines right next to the turbo to melt, I'm mounting the electric power steering over here and simplifying this wiring harness. I really value keeping all of the stock systems of the RX8 working. So in street car fashion, air conditioning, electric power steering, don't overcomplicate the engine swap. Just get the engine in here, get the engine working well and packaged well so nothing's going to rub or fall apart, because I want to be able to put some serious miles on this car. This Cannonball run's going to be 6,000 miles in 5 days. Plus, over the next 10 years, literally just driving my REW swapped RX8 as if it was an OEM car. Because I'm not really worried about protecting the resale value of my already super cheap RX8 with way too much money stuck under the hood. We're just going to enjoy it. I'm super stoked with how this is coming out. So I whipped up a cover right here to go over the electric power steering module. And then also, I do think I am going to leave the Tuned by Sean harness, so this piece here. I'm also going to put it up under this cover and then run the wires through the fender like I was saying. Because this plug is not like a DTM or Weather Pack or any sort of waterproof plug. It's a 3D printed snap together plug, just like you wouldn't stick your Haltech ECU underwater, right? Like, it's not really made for being in the fender, and I don't want to have issues. I've been stranded on the side of the tail of the Dragon because on an FD RX7, the wires for all your ignition and stuff run through the fenders, and if you have big wheels, you rub through the wires, and then your car shuts off. It's real annoying, so don't do that. But I don't want to do that on this, right? So that's my solution there. I am beyond thrilled with how this little plate looks. I like the cutout for the radiator hose, even though it's completely unnecessary. I could have raised the plate up and cleared that. I've given myself tons of room for an air filter, and then I've bent this AC. It normally would be perfectly in line with this stud. There's actually a little bracket, and the bracket holds the lower line and then this block for the upper line and the pressure sensor together. So I just kind of bent the lines over so it lays a little bit more this way. I think I may make another little tab to go off of this to hold that eventually. But very happy with how this presents. If you can imagine the aluminum trays, this and that cover painted Nordic green, this is going to look super trick, as well as that black cover there painted Nordic green. So it should look very clean in here, which is what I want. No, race car vibes, more street car vibes, right? Intercooler pipes, I've just kind of been laying them in here to get a good idea. And then I also got my fuel pressure regulator. I made a little bracket right here to mount this. It's hard to clear a -8 AN line off the side of this in this location. I'm pretty close to the alternator here and there, but I think it's going to work out. I don't know. I haven't gotten the rest of my fuel system yet, which that'll also be, a future more in-depth detail video. But at this point, I need to just have a good scope of where everything is going, such that we don't complicate things for ourselves. I know I've said before in this video, but just, I can, for example, if I put my fuel pressure regulator here, and then all of a sudden I want to mount my MAC valve right there, now the fuel pressure regulator's in the way, which then changes my fuel line routing, which then changes, where the flex fuel sensor goes. That also changes where the wiring for the flex fuel sensor goes, right? If I'm going to put the flex fuel sensor over here, under the car, wherever, I need to then run the wires. So understanding the full scope of the project as you're doing it is huge, because you don't want to, basically screw yourself later. But I think I've got a good scope for everything and how it's all shaken out. So on this project as well, I just released the video talking about the RX8 plug and play ECU, the factory Haltech ECU that can go in here. Okay, it would go in your stock RX8 ECU box. It would fit. You could run an REW engine off of that Haltech ECU fairly simply versus this adapter harness, a cover, putting the ECU in the floor, right? But if you want to buy one of those or you want to get any of this Haltech stuff, tunedbysean.com, go check it out. Mr. Rad5, discount code, get you some Haltech stuff, some sensors, tuning, everything he offers on there. Go check it out. It's super rad to have somebody like that supporting the channel, you know, especially Haltech is the ECU I would buy if I didn't have a discount. It's like, to me, that's the creme de la creme of, I want a nice running rotary engine street car. You know, there's other ECUs for different styles of engines that work just as good, but Haltech has been doing rotaries for a very long time, and all their rotary programming is it's just super good. It's like engineered kind of for this, and then, you know, LS, all that stuff's a little bit secondary to some extent, but it's laying out nicely. I got a bunch more work to do, and I think I'm going to pop this bumper off and try to start getting an intercooler mount going. In addition to, more parts should be showing up as we speak. So the funny thing is I've never owned an FD RX7, so I don't have REW engine parts laying around. So I literally had to order a water pump pulley, some assorted random FD stuff, which is kind of annoying because with the old school stuff, I can basically just find one out in the parts yard, my junk cars. So cut some brackets out on the plasma table. I've got the intercooler positioned where I want it. Got out the trusty $80 hydraulic bender. We're going to put some kinks in this pipe and throw this thing up here. This bash bar is literally here just to hold the intercooler. You know, as this was a track car before, I didn't have the factory crash bar on here. However, I would like to try to add a tow hook point on this to run the factory thread-in tow hooks. All right, guys, I'm in the middle of getting this intercooler situation figured out. If y'all remember, whenever we did the RX8 front end on the FD, we went ahead and I drew up on the plasma table these plates that fit the RX8 frame rails. Now, on the FD over here, none of this core support exists, and I built all of that out of tubes. Go check out that video. So now, on this one, I've made a similar crash structure to what's on the FD. The FD has this weird double swoop in it because the FD bumper, the RX8 front end, it's not quite the same. Okay, they're a little bit different shape. The RX8's a little more round. The front of the FD, for lack of a better thing, is more flat per se, as far as like it's just flat across the front. So the intercooler I'm using is actually a Treadstone 600, nearly, it's like 580 horsepower rated intercooler for an FD RX7. The reason being is because it's the right width and height off the shelf, something I can just buy that has the top exits on the end tanks, okay? So you can see how I've got this situated. There's really no good way for me to keep an OEM RX8 crash bar. So you'll have to, you know, in my opinion, you want an efficient intercooler front end setup, get rid of the crash bar. I mean, at this point, if you crash your car with 600 horsepower, like, you're going to tear some stuff up regardless, and I don't really think the sacrifice of a custom intercooler to fit around a stock RX8 crash bar is worth it, right? So let's look at what we've got, and I've lined the top of the intercooler up effectively with the bottom of the core support. So you can see it barely overlaps, maybe the top row overlaps there, and I might trim some of that metal out because we don't need it. Just this little triangle up in here and same over there, just stuff we don't need. But the reason I've left it up high like this, notice the gap between the bottom of the intercooler and the bottom of the radiator. Similar to my FD over there, I left this opening here. So air is going to be able to go through the intercooler, do its all turbulent tumble thing, still maintain positive pressure between the back of the intercooler and the radiator, in addition to all this extra positive pressure that's going to be coming in under the intercooler and then going up through the AC condenser and the radiator. So we'll seal the under tray to the bottom of the radiator, just like the splitter would be sealed to that on the FD. I don't have any data to prove that this is the best setup. No clue. I know on my first gen, I have something similar to this. Everybody's told me, V-mount, 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 do the V-mount. It's the best setup ever. Okay, well, I can't fit a V-mount with where I want my turbo to be. And personally, V-mounts are kind of annoying because you pop your hood and now if your fins aren't in perfect condition, everyone thinks you neglect your car. So it's like, you know, it's a rotary, it's probably gonna break. I'm gonna set tools on my V-mount. I don't wanna have to like build an aluminum sheet for freaking intercooler, oil cooler duct, got me. I don't wanna have to build an aluminum sheet to cover it whenever I put this thing in service mode, like a BMW or Audi or whatever, right? So to me, this is the most efficient way here. So I'm gonna set the bumper on here and then I'll show you guys what this looks like behind the bumper, because it actually, assuming my bar doesn't hit anything, which this is like 1.25 inch, 120 wall, pretty thick stuff, nice hefty steel bar, you know, mounted straight to the front of the frame. Assuming that doesn't hit the bumper, everything should be good. There's plenty of room under an RX8 bumper, so it should just go right on. But I'll show you the front profile is that on a stock RX8 bumper, this intercooler core basically fills out the entirety of that opening. So you should be able to, even if you wanted to, let me just put the bumper on, I'll explain more. Okay. Little 10 mil bolt to hold that on, and I gotta push this duct up out of the way so that this side slides in. Oil cooler ducting, dropped my oil temps on track, like successful ducting up here. When this was NA, dropped my temps by 30 or 40 degrees. We went from running like 260, 270 oil temps to running 230 oil temps when you're like raging 9,000 RPM to track. So ducting, huge. But let's look at this. The front of the RX8 has, you know, 4 major openings, we'll say. Down here, which is, you know, straight through the radiator. From the factory, only I think about this much of the grill is open. You can see the nice cut squares, perfectly cut. And then you can see in here, I've drilled a bunch of holes. It might be easier to put my hand back there and you can kind of see the holes, the circles. So I've just drilled holes in that. The crash bar went to these top layers. So you've, you know, by removing the crash bar, we have more airflow through here now. And then you have your oil cooler hole, radiator, other oil cooler, right? When you have an under tray in here, it actually seals to out here, and all of this air goes through the radiator as well. So you can see, to duct my intercooler, I won't really have to do much to seal the sides of the intercooler to the front bumper. It's not impeding a ton of my radiator air, which is a huge win, but yet it still has a very high priority of cold air. So what I was getting to just a second ago was you could easily pop this plastic grill out and, you know, leave it open, paint the intercooler black if you wanted to be like full FD style. You know, they don't have a grill in the front, it's just a big hole. Or you could put like a mesh, you know, Fast and Furious 1, go get some chicken wire mesh screen in here to keep the weeds out of it. And then that would give you a ton of priority through this intercooler, which is kind of my intent. So on the Mazda Speed bumper, which I have over there, which will go on this eventually, the only thing that sucks about that Mazda Speed bumper is that it doesn't have this big hole down here. It's just the center hole, okay? So I think when I do that one, I don't know. I'm still kind of torn on how I'm gonna set the Mazda Speed bumper up to kind of maximize airflow. Honestly, the stock bumper and lip setup kind of works out a little bit better because say we do custom ducting for this as well, where the radiator is sealed, you know, rectangularly, like rectangularly in line with the sides of the radiator. Now I've got this little hole right here. And what I'd really like to do is build a little, effectively like a brake cooling duct, but instead of going to the brakes, because this is a street car, I want to take this brake cooling duct, go down the side of here, up through here behind the radiator, and get this air, cold air, up in that hole behind the radiator in order to cool the bottom of the turbo. So to get some air on the turbo manifold and the wastegate, I think that would be a huge benefit just to managing, not really EGTs while you're on the chip, but managing my engine bay temperature for just long-term sustainability, right? So like being able to effectively take this thing, you know, on our Cannonball run with a turbo setup and not melt the turbo manifold completely apart. So that's really the intent there. But I'm super stoked with where I've got the intercooler at this point. So I'm gonna fire the plasma table back up, make some trick little brackets to mount to this off-the-shelf Treadstone intercooler. And then we should be mostly done and ready to finish out the crash structure and start on intercooler piping, which is gonna be the simplest thing ever. You know, right off the top, come across through the hole into their respective tubular locations. So let's get cracking on all of that. This is the fun stuff.
One of the things that I've always liked about project cars is cars that you can't just buy parts for to finish the build. And with that being said, on this car, paving the way for a more constructive, serviceable, just a better overall REW swap of higher quality, I've been trying to engineer this kit such that it could be sold in small quantities to some of you guys. So using the plasma table, albeit I'm struggling to make it work right now,
I have no idea why this is not piercing the metal.
is really just so that I can reproduce these parts quickly.
Finally got it to cut. I went through and like made sure I had a really good ground, and now it's working. I guess the water mixture kind of made the ground mad or something. Who knows, always something.
Such that if one of you guys were to want the same or similar swap as to what I have, that I could just not have all of my custom one-off work go to waste. So these little brackets, super easy for me to reproduce. And honestly, just having that mentality with building this kit makes this a more fun challenge, which I enjoy.
And just like that, we've got an intercooler. Everything's gonna fit nicely with a piece of aluminum through here. Probably paint that green to match the car. The engine bay is going to get repainted at some point as well. All these panels will be green at some point. It just looks sick. I love the simplicity of it. The thing that's crazy is I have to have a coupler here and here, just a straight coupler, because it would be impossible for me to get this panel installed if, like, the right side could probably be one piece. You might be able to snake that in there and then put the left side together, but it's definitely just going to be easier to assemble the front intercooler, right? That stays on the car pretty much. These two can come out. Then I can take these back pipes off, pull the motor, do whatever I need to do. So serviceability is super important to me. You have to be able to work on your car easily. If it's a pain in the butt to work on, then you just need it to be 100% reliable. But if it also, you know, if it is a pain in the butt to work on, you're just going to hate working on it. And then when it breaks, it's going to sit, and then it's going to sit, and then somebody like me is going to come and buy it and finish your project. So I'm stoked though with this. It's been a long day getting this stuff done amongst other projects. I'm waiting on, I have a 90-degree coupler coming for this, and I probably should have got like a 120, but this is just, you know, an AC line. So most likely I can probably tweak that 90-degree just a smidge, but this tube right here will come up and over and then kick back a little bit. So it'll have like a little bit of a S-jog in it, but I just left it here for now. I've got enough kind of wiggle room with all of these that this tube will be parallel to this box. This tube will be parallel to this tube. And then this tube is parallel to that tube. So, all the tubes. But I'm super pumped. I was thinking, as I'm getting into this, the one thing I forgot to like, oh, this is going to go here, is my catch can. And I've got the engine bay looking so pretty right now, I don't know where I'm going to put my catch can. There really isn't any room, like, back here, you know? We got, I'm going to have to bend this fuel line down. That's going to have to get tweaked somewhere so it can clear the intercooler pipe. But effectively, or I guess a 180 would work, I can't put it back there. My fuel filter is going to go right here, real sexy injector dynamics deal. Can't go there. That's the hole for the downpipe. I could jam it way back in that corner. I guess it could go right here in the middle, but then it's going to be ugly. I really just want this to look super simple. So, I mean, once everything is painted in here, guys, like this will be green, the top of this will be green. Maybe I'll put some black vinyl or something on that so it's black, but effectively all you will see is like turbo intercooler pipes. That is it. Some sponsor stickers, you know, tuned by Sean, full function engineering, Phalanx Performance, all that stuff will be in here. But the only place I can think of, and it'll work well for routing too, I'm about to build an oil filler neck with a breather, and that -10 breather is going to come down under the intercooler pipe, and I'm going to put my catch can down in here. So as long as it clears my belts, which it should, is above the sway bar, which it should, and then I've got an oil cooler line that's got to run all the way across, I think we should be pretty much meant for it to live down there. And then for the sake of emptying it, I'll put like a petcock and a drain valve that goes out by the subframe, so you can just throw like a cup or something under there, kit the petcock, drain it, and there's no removing the catch can, you know, to like dump it into something, right? Like it's always a pain if you have like a standard catch can with no drain, you got to take it off and then go pour it into something. Like that's just, it's not serviceable, right? We got to be able to work on stuff. But man, am I stoked with how this is looking. It's just looking so good. I'll pop the bumper off and show you guys what this looks like with the bumper off. Actually, before I do that, let's raise it up and I'll show you what it looks like under the bumper. I'm honestly, I think I've said this like 42,000 times in this video. I'm super stoked with how this looks. But you can see here, as you saw a little bit earlier before I did the piping, I'm gonna come in here and pretty much that whole entire black grill, I'm gonna take all of that out and drill all the holes out so that there's a lot of airflow able to go through the intercooler. There really isn't any need for any ducting or like sealing. I guess I could put some foam or something in that little crack right there to seal the top of the radiator to the back of the intercooler. You know, like I said, I can probably trim, you can see some of this is blocking the intercooler, but I could probably trim some of that out, but I think, you know, it might be worth 5% extra efficiency, so not a huge deal. I do have a brand new condenser to go in this that I need to grab out of the box, get that installed, and then, you know, hook up all the lines and then build ducts. The cool part about this intercooler is it's the same width as the radiator. Notice, same width. So, like the core is, I can build ducts to seal the radiator up to the intercooler and then to here to have this perfect ducted, like just massive efficiency airflow zone that goes right through all the coolers. Now, it probably would be more efficient to stack all the coolers up against each other, just like the condenser is mounted to the radiator very closely. But for the sake of packaging, we're just gonna have to deal with it. It's a street car, not a track car. So, you know, on a racetrack, you would be full rip, gnarly, tons of heat soak, right? All the airflow, but tons of heat through the turbocharger. And on this, it's like, okay, we're going to do the cannonball run, which is not going to require horsepower. We need to, you know, efficiently manage our temperatures, but maybe a pull every hour. I don't know. You know, we have our passing power to get around cars and stuff, which is efficient. You know, it'll probably be like a downshift to fourth, rip it, and then be cruising again, right? So I think this will work. You know, front mounts people have been doing them for ages, and this intercooler is overkill. Well, at this stage of the game, it's overkill. But when we turn this thing up, pull the motor, build the motor, upgrade the transmission, then we'll be, you know, 500-600 horsepower. I really want to make close to 600. That's the max of what this intercooler is going to do. So here's another look. Ignore the wires hanging down. These are just starter wires, engine ground, but you can see oil pan pretty much flush with the subframe. So I'm going to make, you know, a skid plate / the splitter is going to come in here and clear the oil pan and then hook onto this bar back here where my engine mounts are at. Ignore my spacers for now. I've got it spaced at just over an inch, so it's 1 1/8 inches. And then I have some 3/4 inch like energy suspension bushings, and then I'll make some like spacers to put the engine exactly where I want it as far as its height. I think most people mount their REWs lower and then do a low profile oil pan, but I'm pretty happy with where this is at. So the next major thing, which is going to be the next video, we're coming down to the end of this one. It's been crazy, hasn't it? All sorts of stuff's gotten done. Is to connect with tubes. That right there, the bottom of the turbo, to that right there. So that's what's happening next. Finishing up the turbo kit. So I cannot wait for this to be done. It is going to happen so fast. I've gotten to this point. Obviously, this video has been filmed over the course of a few days. Actually, honestly, like a week or so, a week and a half. Yeah, probably almost 2 weeks worth of effort getting everything sorted. You know, because a lot of the stuff when it comes down to building this, will be my little end of the video rant right here, is like building a car like this isn't something, it's not an FD, okay, obviously, but an FD RX7, you can literally buy everything on the internet that you need. A custom catch can that fits in a perfect location, a V-mount that goes in the perfect spot and it all fits. Yeah, you know, FD owners, people are gonna be like, oh, no, nothing fits on an FD, you have to know it works together. Okay, I get that, but to do an REW swap and an RX8, like I had to make all of that. All the intercooler pipes was I ordered bins based off of me making a general assessment of where I wanted them to go and then had to put it together still, right? Versus like HKS, you know, V-mount kit, it pretty much fits. So with this project, it's been sitting here for probably 3 months. I've been envisioning and planning as I've been working on the FD. The parts for the, you know, the engine management stuff, the turbo, all of that is for this. It just takes a lot longer, and I really like it when videos, you know, projects, especially for you guys, like hit like FD video, FD video, FD video. You get to see a lot of progress. This is going to be RX8 video, RX8 video, RX8 video. Cannonball run is happening ASAP. I cannot tell you when, but let's just say this is getting tuned in probably 2 weeks. So there's not going to be a lot of time for testing, not to give the cops a head start on finding me on my Cannonball run, but we're Cannonball running very soon. We're coming for this record, okay? Because we already have the fastest RX8 Cannonball. We're the only people that have done it, honestly. We're, according to the Cannonballers, second place for rotary engines. Some dude in the 80s did it in a first generation RX7, not even in an FD, a first gen, probably with a 12A. So we got to beat that. I really want to. One of my life goals is to do a Cannonball in under 30 hours, and I'm hoping that we can do that. So I've got a rear end over here to put the RX7 FD, like 3.9, or it might be a 410. I think it's a 410. Either way, we're changing the rear final drive ratio of the RX8 for more top speed. We're doing the REW, so we have more horsepower. And then, sub 30-hour Cannonball run, chuckles, 60 gallons of gas in the back, the whole deal. Go check out the old Cannonball run video if you haven't seen it, but that's going to be the end of this one. I feel like I've been talking for too long. It's turning into a Patreon video, but at the end here, got to give thanks to a couple people. Tuned by Sean, thank you so much for helping out with the car. You know, he's going to be shouting out in a bunch of these other videos too. Full Function Engineering, I don't think I have any of their parts on the car right now, but they are helping me out a bunch with parts on this car. So go check out Full Function Engineering as well. Phalanx Performance as well. Ernie is just, you know, I should just say huge thanks to Ernie, because Ernie he's super inspiring, all the Turbo RX8 stuff. You know, this isn't Renesis Turbo, but go check out Phalanx Performance if you need work done with your car. And then the most important people are the Patreon members. So if you want to support the channel, go check out the Patreon. It's basically set up such that you can hop on there, ask me questions. I can answer your questions. You get to see all the stuff that happens in the background. Like they've been seeing this car come together while y'all have been seeing RX8 and FD stuff, which is cool. And it's the most efficient way to support. And none of this would be possible without them. Like the Patreon is 100% what helps fund all this stuff. So, you know, I have to give them a huge thanks. But with that, live a life you don't need a vacation from. Keep it rad, and I will see y'all in the next one. So, there's an FD here, and then there's my FD. That just looks like an RX8, and then this is my RX8. That just looks like an FD. So, needless to say, Cannonball run. We're coming for that record. Peace, guys.